Hey, hey,
Well,
how's it going?
it's going fantastic. How are you doing?
I am doing all right. I'm just enjoying a beautiful day.
Are you still in Barcelona?
I'm still in Barcelona. Yes.
Mhm.
As
Where's your
as you as many of these podcasts I'm recording in Barcelona.
where are you heading to next?
That is a really good question. I'm not fully sure. Possibly back to Boston,
Hmm.
or I wouldn't mind going back to Bulgaria. I'm
Hmm.
also thinking about Albania,
Ooh.
and I also am supposed to catch up with a friend in Colombia, and then eventually we're going to catch up in Brazil. So, but I mean, that's just what's on the table now. Things could change. I don't know.
Well, that actually segues a little bit into our topic today, which is things they don't teach us about assessing risk. I mean, granted,
Yes.
going to places like Colombia and Bulgaria aren't necessarily risky, but still, one has to question how does one come to the point where you're like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I know it's not, it's probably a little risky, and some might say I'm crazy, but I'm still going to do it.
Well, I guess it's all part of it is just a matter of how do you assess your own risk and what is a risk. So, with Bulgaria, for example, I don't think Bulgaria is a risky place to go, but
Hmm.
there's so little information about it and in English. And not a lot of stuff there is in English. And so some people may feel that's a risk for them. They won't be able to communicate, won't be able to understand. And so, I know people who would be afraid to do that. They would say
Hmm.
that is too much of a risk.
Especially
But
where countries like that didn't participate heavily in the slave trade or in sort of things in Africa. So their minority population is minuscule,
minuscule. Hmm.
so you're hard pressed to find someone who looks like you. And if when you think they look like you, they look at you like, where are you from?
Hmm. I think there's more letters in the word minuscule than the number of black people I saw when I was in Bulgaria. Seriously, seriously, I'm pretty sure that's an accurate statement.
All right. Well,
But what about you? Where are you traveling soon?
I'm not going to be doing anything that risky, my friend. I'm heading to Toronto. So I'm actually
Yeah.
going to visit my family. I'm a good West Indian, if for those who didn't know that about me. And like most West Indians, I have family in New York, London, um, Toronto, and Miami. And I think I did a sort of informal survey once where I found it's basically impossible if you're from the Caribbean to not have relatives in those countries or in those places, cities, I should say. Um, and if you don't think that you do, it's because you don't know them, which is fair. Which is fair. A lot of us have lost touch with our cousins or our family, dating back. Unfortunately for me, I can go back to my great grandparents, so I got a lot of cousins.
Well, it'll be interesting if you ever have informal conversations with family about how they assessed the risk when they left the islands and then moved to all those cities. Because I don't know if they knew people before they arrived, but then also there's no change of language depending upon the country, but the weather, the food, the
Definitely the
government
weather,
systems, yeah, all of those
diet,
things. Hmm.
culture, a lot. I mean, and that's a whole nother topic because there's a whole thing right now in the UK about this. I think it's called Windjammer. That boat,
Windrush.
yeah, one of those kids. So yeah, that was a big risk, a huge risk.
Hmm.
I don't know if I have the situation was reversed right now. I don't think I'd have the balls to do it. I don't know. I don't know, but moving on. Allow me to introduce today's guest, Miss Trina Mitchell. Born and raised in East Moline or Moline, I hope I said that right, Illinois, she enlisted in the US Army in January of 1987. And I have to point out there that this was when she was still considered a minor at 17, and her parents had to actually agree to this. Big risk. After touring the Army, Miss Trina transitioned into the reserves. She holds a Bachelor in Business and Finance from UMass Lowell. She has turned her passion for fitness into a successful boot camp style training program. And through a friend, I wonder who, a friend's encouragement, she has ventured into real estate investing. And introducing Miss Trina Mitchell.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
Hey.
Hey,
Hey,
Thanks
Miss
for joining
Trina.
us.
How are
And
you?
we're fantastic, but as we ask all our guests, where in the world are you now?
Where I'm at in the world is Boston, Massachusetts, specifically Mattapan.
Hey.
I know it. Holding it down, whatever that means.
Power to the people.
And I actually have been living in the Boston area really since 1991. In Boston proper since 1998, I think. It was a welcome culture change for me. As you read in the bio, from East Moline, Illinois, all there is Black people and white people. And only white people get the culture there. So they got to be from Germany and from England and from Poland, and Black people just got to be Black. So I was never really familiar with the West Indian culture, Jamaican, Haitians. And of course, we don't get any of that really in our school systems or whatever. So when I moved out here, it was like a mecca for me. I met Jamaicans, Haitians, people from Martinique, and all of these different islands and places. And then, of course, came in a lot of the African cultures too. We met some people in Illinois from maybe Nigeria or Ghana, but that was it. And that was on a rare occasion. So coming up here, you got everything, not to mention people from Sri Lanka and people from Iraq and Iran going to school at MIT or Harvard or various. Boston to me was the most diverse place that I was introduced to.
That's interesting. Well, so, it's funny you talk about living in Boston and all that stuff, because I mean, as you know, the topic we have for you today is assessing risk. And I can think for a lot of Black people watching this, thinking of as a Black person moving to Boston, which is quote unquote racist town, it was definitely a risk. But I want to step back a little bit to one of your earliest and what I would consider the largest risk that anyone ever took, and how you came to that assessment where you, as a minor, still legally a minor, joined the military. It was like, I'm joining the Army, no big deal, and had to have your parents sign off on this.
Yeah.
How did you come to, first of all, how did you decide that was something you wanted to do with your life?
Sure. So at 12 and 13, I already knew academics were not my strong suit right away. I could learn, I could read, I could write. I didn't completely suck at school, but school was a good social program for me. Not necessarily the place where I was going to, get my best learning and get all of my, A's and B's and go to college. So the whole traditional route for me about, you're going to go take your SATs, take your ACTs, then go to college, then get a job. That was not how I was made, how I was built individually. And I was just like, if I try to do all of that at 17 and try to go to University of XYZ and ABC, chances are I'd either be run out of that place or flunking out of that place, because I just wasn't ready. And I knew that, honestly, I knew that at 12 and 13. And I was like, you know what, though? I could join the military. I know the exam isn't hard to get into. I'm already athletic. I'm already physical. I already knew I had a strong mindset. So all of that, that brainwashing stuff they do, I could just pretend and say, yeah, sure, I'm falling for it, and not fall for it, and just live my best life. I'd be able to travel. I'd be able to have a skill set that's transferable. I'd be able to get some sort of job, maybe just a government job or something else, but I'd have some sort of skill set that would be able to transfer into the corporate world of some sort, or just the other civilian world. Not to mention, I knew I had to have, as a Black woman back then, and I graduated high school in 1987. So I was still under the teaching that you Black kids, they don't want you having jobs anyway. They don't want to hire you anyway. So you have two things you had to do. Is you're a woman, you had to have your hair straight, look almost like them without being them. And you had to have a college degree so that they would hire you, so that you could be comfortable for the majority, what they wanted you to look like, basically.
So Trina, can I just jump in for a second? Because I want to step back and ask one question around. So East Moline, I'm guessing, is kind of rural. It's like a rural community, or it's like a lot of ruralness around it. So why did you choose the military over going to something around agriculture? Like, because I feel like that would be more accessible. Like, what was the risk you assessed there?
I was not in, I mean, it's cornfields out there, you're right, in the Midwest, but I wasn't raised that way, you know, in terms of agriculture or anything like that. We were in, that's a very good point you make, because I live literally right around the corner from John Deere, the factory itself.
Oh.
All of the parents around us had jobs there. That was my dad's first job when he moved to the area, because John Deere was paying what they said were very, very handsome salaries. And so people had opportunities to live this, I guess, upper middle class sort of idea, having that role. J.I. Case was there. All of the main agricultural plants were right there within, I'd say, a 15-minute commute of where I lived, honestly. And that's commuting whether you took the bus or whether you drove. Very easy to get to. But I didn't want to stay in that space because it's a small hick town. It's the Midwest. There's corn, there's Chicago, and that's the big city. So that's worth going to, but that was 3 hours west of where I lived. And what else were you going to do? It's a really good place to raise your kids, to raise a family in a safe space, give them some grounding. But when you're young and want to explore the world or want to move on to that, whatever that next level is, you didn't want to stay there. So that had the agricultural piece of it, Derek had no interest. I had no interest, never did. And when I was coming up, everybody was talking about going to school for engineering, going to school for nursing, going to school for journalism, things like that. And I wasn't doing any of that, or I had no interest in any of that. So
how did your parents help you sort of, or did they, well, from what you said, they didn't really help you assess the risk because you were like, I'm doing this. I'm going to the military. Well, how did they react to that?
They didn't like that at all. My father was a Navyman, and he was like, well, if you're doing it, do not join the Navy at all. He was like, that's the worst place for a woman. Do not go into the Navy, whatever you do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did he say why?
He wouldn't see. That's the thing. They wouldn't always tell me certain things or why or whatever. I do remember, you guys remember the story about tailhook in the Navy?
Oh,
so to give you some context, in the Navy, if you're on those ships for however long, sometimes you could be on the ship for a month, sometimes 2 months, maybe sometimes 6 months at sea or whatever. And my understanding from my Navy colleagues is that you can be on the ship with both male and female. Not only that, but sometimes the space is so limited where not only are you sharing rooms, you're literally sharing beds in some spaces. Because people work in shifts. When your shift is up, you get out of your bed and you share a cot with someone else. So you lay out your own cot and that type of thing. So bringing you back to here, tailhook is one of the things that leaked to the press. And it was there was the harassment of women. I believe to the point, it was sexual harassment. I believe to the point of rape. But I know it was very, very, very blatant, bad sexual harassment where it created a true hostile environment for the females on that particular ship. They actually even made either a movie out of it or I
think I heard about that. But not to cut you off, but I think we want to get back to the point of this because that's again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
but this was interesting because like you're adding an element that I hadn't even thought about. So even though that was the Navy, you're thinking about going to the Army. It's the armed forces overall. Right. That seems like it's a risk. That would be, I mean, it's in society generally, but I mean, you're talking about how things could be kept secret and kept quiet across the armed forces. That's another risk that was directly told to you by your father. And given that, I don't think Gulf War I had happened yet, but the United States tends to end up in a big war every 20 years, more or less every 25 years. So there's the potential of like sexual assault, there's a potential of going to a war. I don't know what other factors you may have considered, but like there's a lot of risks that you had to assess.
And that's what my parents didn't want happening to me. And with me being the youngest child, I think I was considered probably the one that needed the most care out of all my older siblings. I was the youngest, I was daddy's baby and all that. And so all of my older sisters, you know, they were academically strong. They kind of knew what they wanted to do. They figured out their own scholarships, their own way to college, and, you know, had gone off to make the world a better place. And then here comes me. So I was the one that was expected to just kind of live up under my, suck my thumb till I was 30, live up under my dad and mom till I was 40. And at some point in there, I would have found my way, type of thing. And that would have made, I think, things comfortable for everybody. So when I broke out with, well, no, I'll be joining the Army because I want to leave home. I don't want to stay here. I don't want to go to community college. That's, you know, what good is that? And work at the library for a while, and, you know, for what? I want to go out.
Named John or Bill.
Right. And then, you know, have my dad buy me another $3,500 car to put around in and stay at home. And all. So I was just like, no, I don't want that life. I was ready in my own mental space to leave the nest, because I had all of those abilities to do what I need to do, take care of myself, but I knew college was not the route for me. And so I was just like, yeah. So my father was just like, yeah, I'm not for the Navy for a lot of those reasons, I think, that I mentioned earlier. So I was like, well, no, not the Navy, because I didn't swim at the time, and I still am not a very good swimmer at all. And I was like, so they're not throwing me in no waters or whatever. And like I said, the Army was the...
Wow. So they signed off. And I think you told me a story once where you actually got into a car with a strange man and another strange man to go to your basic training or your tour or something.
Exactly. So twice, the recruiter came to my home, and he was like, you know, you're 17. This is January. You don't turn 18 until July. So he had to come to my house and have my parents sign me off. I think they had to turn me over to the government. And she was like, you really, really want to do this? And I was like, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, an interesting piece. When he came to my school first, because I called him from the counseling office, and I was like, I'm interested in joining the Army, blah, blah, blah. He came to my school. We talked. He came back to my school another couple of days with my enlistment papers. And the questions that he asked, I've had this conversation with some people before. That was back then when they had ask and tell instead of don't ask, don't tell. So he literally asked me, do I smoke marijuana? I said, no. Do I ever plan to smoke marijuana? And I said, no. And he's asking me this and literally writing it down on my enlistment paperwork. And he goes, are you gay? And I was like, no. He goes, do you plan to be gay? Do you plan to have sex? And he asked very specifically, you ever plan to have sex, same sex between now and in the future, whatever. And I'm 17 and I didn't know they asked you that. And he didn't look me in the face when he asked. He just looked down his piece of paper. Are you gay? You have sex with women? Do you plan to have sex with women? Do you smoke marijuana? Do you plan to smoke marijuana? Yes or no? And so I was like, no, what? He goes, okay, good. He goes, sign here. And I signed it. And he goes, now we need your parents to turn you over to the government as well.
So, okay, so I need to wind this back just a little bit again. So in all of this around assessing risk, there's also the flip side of the coin of delivering trust, or like instilling trust. What made you trust any of this, or have trust in any of this, to be like, this is worth the risk?
I don't know. I think deep down, it's something that I just always knew. The Army to me wasn't anything. It was unpopular for sure because of all those reasons. But for me, it was like I guess you could say I felt like it was my only option, because it was one way where I could leave home, have a place to stay, have a job, have income, and get an experience. And it was a way to save money. It was a way to gain a lot of, like I said, a lot of skill sets. It was a way to be exposed, and you definitely get some exposure, because you meet all types of people in the military. It's actually kind of crazy. And it was also a good lesson in is actually a good lesson in diversity, believe it or not. Everywhere I've been because of the military, I have run into every culture, every race. I don't know how they do it, but they seem to and I don't believe they don't really have a diversity program as far as I'm concerned. But they seem to know how to mesh all the races and all the cultures and all the weird people with all the strange people, all the one percenters with all the no percenters, and we're all in one big box working together. And I will give the United States Army that credit, because I have been around some folks. One man recently told me, he said, he goes, I used to be a racist. He goes, I was a starch racist, this white guy. And I was like, okay. And I don't know where, we were just talking and he just kind of put that out there. And I was like, I don't know where this is going. He goes, but after basic training and in the Army, he goes, I slept in the bunks with these guys. I had to work with these guys. He goes, and I learned, he goes, they're just like me. Everybody's just trying to make it. We're all trying to do what we got to do. He goes, and it just changed my whole world. He goes, and now he goes, I see those men that I used to have a stark hatred for. He goes, I didn't know any better. He goes, because my father taught me that. He said that.
Yeah.
He said, and when I learned, he goes, these guys literally became like family to me, because we were all striving for the same thing. He goes, and I can't believe how much my life has changed because of that. And I thought that was so interesting that he just sort of opened that up to me out of nowhere. And so all that to say, you definitely meet all kinds. And it's just really interesting. If you let it be a benefit to you, it can be.
Well,
I mean, all I hear is just more risk and more risk and more risk.
I know, right? But I got to make a quick point. And this is in no way a recruiting video. It's not. We're not encouraging anyone to do this. Because you just saying it out there, putting it out there. This is not a recruiting video.
Yeah, it's not for everybody. I would not recommend it. Thank you, Wendy. No, and I do, because young people now will ask me, some of the people about, well, what about the military? And I'm like, well, what is it that you want to do? And what about the military attracts you to be in there? Because it's not for everybody.
True.
In basic, the fear that you talk about in terms of the risk, I watched a lot of other young women, young girls go through that, and it wasn't good for them. I watched a lot of girls who were not very athletic and who just, for whatever reason, I don't think their brain caught up with the rest of their maturity, and it didn't bode well for them. So it is not an organization for everybody. You definitely have to have your own mindset, have your own strength, know who you are, because there are definitely predators there that can easily take advantage. And by the grace of God, that did not happen to me. But I don't recommend the military for everybody. And I would not, even though I'm still in it and it's worked out for my function. It's proven to be a fit for me. It's not a fit for everybody. It is not. Mm-mm.
But in the spirit of continuing the conversation around assessing risk, another point that we mentioned about in your bio is that you have recently, the last 4 or 5 years, have gotten into real estate investment as a way to sort of get to your fire, which is another topic Derek and I talked about.
Yes.
And you assessed that was, for some people, that's crazy. Here you are, a lady of a certain luxurious age. You got your coins put away for that quote unquote retirement. And here you are taking a risk by putting your money into something we weren't taught. How did you assess that risk?
Well, interesting you asked that question, Wendy. I think I have to say I never thought about going that. And I assessed that because I spent a weekend with a very good friend who for the last 20 or 25 years of her life, that had proven to be one of the best things she could have ever done for herself. And it clearly saw her into an early luxurious, like early retirement, and a very nice way of living and earning your money and making your money work for you. And as an investment finance person, that becomes the mindset, especially as you mature into that retirement space. Mm-hmm. You're like, Now I've worked for my money these past 20 or 30 years. Now I need my money to work for me. How is that going to happen? You and I had spent a lot of time together. And one weekend we were talking and you were very detailed about, okay, this is how it happens. This is how it can work, or this is how you could maybe let it work for you if you can buy a place. And I assessed the risk because, one, I was talking with you about, how you came into that. Two, real estate is one thing that will never depreciate. Now, we definitely had the whole real estate tumble and all that stuff, but it bounces back. And to me, in my experience, it bounces back better than the market does. And it's more of there's no guarantees in life, but it's a stronger bet on your savings and on your money than just putting it all in the stock market or just putting it all in that. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, there was another episode, we talk about FIRE and sort of how we got to be financially independent and retired early. It's something that's very passionate to me and near and dear to my heart, as well as Derek's, and trying to getting people that we know to come to this.
I will say though, liken to the whole military and the risk assessing on that, I understand. I've learned too that entrepreneurship or real estate and all that also probably isn't for everybody, because thankfully I've gotten all these, well, this needs repair, that needs repair. You got to be responsible for the wear and tear on a home. And then when you're buying something, you do as much homework as you can, but you're never guaranteed what's underneath the covers until you unveil the covers as the owner. And so knowing that, I realize, especially with some of my friends, I realize that everybody's not made for all of that either, because some folks, the glamour is what we work for. Yeah. But you know what I mean? That's what you work for. But the whole word on that is work. You got to work for it before you can see the sunny side. I mean, Wendy, I just talked with you a week ago and you were in the south of France. Oh, I'm in the south of France. I'm like, must be nice. But you put in the work for 20, 25 years.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
And the work that you did, it's I mean, what I know of you isn't even half of the work that you did. And I already know a lot, I feel like, in terms of the amount of work that you did, the turnover of real estate that you did, and moving and all of that, literal moving and shaking. And it's not for it's not for the ambivalent. I'll say that. Once you're in it,
again,
another topic, dedicated to it.
True, but you also transitioned from the military. You transitioned into having your fitness business.
I did.
Which I guess there wasn't a lot of.
Which I did not know about that.
I did in 2005. I still in corporate America, and knowing I wanted to transition out of there at some point in time, and knowing that I still needed another stream of income, or at least just some spending money. I enjoy being fit and moving and getting in all types of activities. If you travel a lot, you got to stay fit, you got to stay healthy. I said, well, I'm in shape and I know something about fitness. Let me go get my fitness certification. So I signed up for American Council of Exercise, did the exam, and started working at the YMCA, started working at a local privately owned gym. And from there, I gained sort of a little bit of notoriety with a few of the customers there, and then branched off and just did my own boot camp business.
I had no idea that you had a fitness business. We've never talked about it. I knew that you were fit and you stayed fit, but I thought it was for the military. So like, I'm impressed and proud. Congratulations on starting that business.
Thank you, Dan.
And
nice.
No, thank you for sharing. And what your story is making me think about is a motto, one of the mottos that I live by, which is no risk, no reward. But I think what I would add to that, which is something that the two of you brought up earlier, is it's calculated risks. You're not just gambling. You're not just throwing your money away. You're not just saying, yeah, I'm just going to do this completely uninformed with your eyes closed. You got the information, you assessed the risk, you determined that the potential reward was greater than the potential risk, and you went for it. And so I think that is something that that mindset, I think, is important to pull out of this and sort of elevate in this conversation, so that people watching are like, oh, she just went for it and didn't do any research. You did a lot of research. You've been doing a lot of research, and it's a calculated risk.
Yeah. And I also had, before I did that, I actually getting to know people. You all have been a blessing in my life in that you both gave some good counsel to me as well. Because we had dinner a couple weeks after you and I think a week after you and I spent the weekend together, Wendy, hanging out and everything. And then I had dinner with both you and Derek, and I got engaged in terms of, okay, so how are you doing what you're doing? You know, how are you allowing this to work for you? What are the different avenues that you're going about it? I didn't approach mine in the same way that the both of you approached it as far as real estate goes, but I took the plunge once I understood how you all were able to do it. And I was like, okay, so Derek went about it this way and it worked for him. What do I have so I can basically achieve the same thing at my own level?
Yes.
That's another risk assessment that I had to take for myself. Okay. So he was able to, because let's face it, you know, our jobs are different, our incomes are different, they can vary, whatever you have saved or not saved, it varies. So you have to think of, how can I achieve this within my own level of income, or where I'm at in life? Where can I get the same thing? And so the first property that I bought, I had to calculate the fact that, okay, I can't be there because I chose Chicago. I'm living in Boston. I can't be there to literally do all of the physical things a landlord would do. So what's a good investment property for me? Obviously, I'm not living there. And so it turned out to be a condominium, you know, a piece of property, a condominium. Well, where will I buy it? How will it serve me, so that not only am I getting a good investment piece, but that I'm also making a little bit of income too on top of that, to save some money. And my money's now working for me a little more than what it used to be. So that was something that I had to calculate. And then once I figured that out, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. Everything adds up. If it fails, it only
makes
means
dollars and cents.
Yeah, it made dollars and cents. I chose in a good area, one that I could afford. Two, at the time, I'm like, okay, can I afford the mortgage? I know I'm going to be renting out some, but can I afford the mortgage? And that was something in my own head. And I was like, okay, fine, I can do that for a little bit of while it's empty, or while I'm trying to figure out who the best tenant is or whatever. And then, how can I, keep things up on it and that type of thing. So it was a condo that had an HOA. It was already being managed by a management company and all that other kind of stuff. So it worked out. And then because of my contacts with Derek had a great contact with a real estate agent who kind of gives you a good, I guess, the white glove service, they call it.
So that's what he calls it.
Right, yes. Right. And so I was like, okay, I can utilize his service not only to gain the property and all of that, but to also be my eyes and ears while I can't be there.
Now, all that being said, because the name of the show is Things They Didn't Teach Us, what do you wish you had learned about assessing risk earlier that probably would have propelled you a little sooner to certain things, for example, for like real estate, for example?
Okay, so I wish I would have learned a lot of it earlier in life. Everybody talks about home buying for yourself.
Yeah.
But we never have a conversation about home buying for the sake of early retirement, FIRE, for the sake of having your own investment property, for the sake of starting your own wealth. That's what it is. Having your own continual wealth, building wealth.
Yeah.
I guess I wish there were more conversations about that. And I know that there's a whole platform out there and lots of other podcasts where people are talking about building wealth and all that stuff, especially for Black people, because that's a big deal for us, as we don't have that in general type of thing. But I wish there were more conversations around building wealth in the way of real estate. How do you do that? How do you keep it up? How does that, and that there was more of a community that taught that. And when I say taught that, really gave you an intimate conversation on how it's working for them and how they got into it. Because I personally don't mind telling people how I landed into into this situation, but it's a risk they still have to figure to take themselves.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so Trina, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day, because she's in the military. She got a regular job, y'all. She has her fitness business, and she does real estate. What she does not do is karaoke. Yes, no.
I have done karaoke.
Oh, well, I stand corrected.
Girl, my favorite song is "Best of My Love."
Hey, I look forward to that one day. So, Derek, any closing thoughts, remarks, points of interest?
Well, I'll just go back to what I said before. No risk, no reward. But again, a calculated risk is really where you kind of have to be focused. If you're going to take a risk, at least that's what I think each of us would say is, make sure you're doing your research, you're talking to your folks, you're getting your counsel, and taking that calculated risk to get to where you want to be. But that's really it. I think Trina really said it all. And there really wasn't much more for me to do than say that little encapsulation, but that was it. But if you're out there and you're watching and you have questions for Trina, please feel free to leave your questions or any comments in the question or comment field on whatever platform you're looking at. And hopefully, if she's not busy with the military, her fitness job, her other job, traveling, or singing karaoke, she may have time to answer your questions. And if not, maybe we'll bring her back for another episode to continue the conversation and talk more about assessing risk, taking risk, and other ways of looking at life. But thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.